Senior Commander Zaxtel stood before the polished surface of their cabin viewport, all four arms methodically adjusting the ceremonial sashes that crossed their iridescent uniform. The reflection that stared back showed a distinguished officer of the Hegemony Defense Force, their scaled skin shimmering with the subtle blue patterns that denoted their high rank and academic achievements. "Computer, review mission parameters," Zaxtel commanded, their inner eyelids flickering in a gesture of mild annoyance. This assignment felt beneath their station, but orders were orders. The ship's artificial intelligence responded in the soothing tones all hegemony vessels used. Mission classification: Diplomatic Exchange Program. Destination: United States Military Academy, Earth. Primary objective: observe and report on human military training methodologies. Duration: 1 standard week. Zaxtel's upper arms continued adjusting their uniform, while their lower ones sorted through the holographic briefing materials. Earth's West Point Academy, a primitive-looking collection of gray stone buildings beside a river. How quaint. The humans had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 years ago, and yet the Hegemony High Command insisted on treating them as equals in these diplomatic exchanges. Display historical summary of human military development, Zaxtel ordered, settling into their acceleration couch as the transport vessel prepared for departure. The computer obliged, projecting a timeline of human warfare across the cabin wall. "Interesting," Zaxtel murmured, noting how recently humans had developed powered flight, space travel, and energy weapons. By hegemony standards, they were technological infants. The commander's species had been conducting organized military campaigns for over 10 millennia, perfecting the art of warfare through careful iteration and precise documentation. Their reverie was interrupted by the ship's announcement: approaching Earth orbital space, preparing for atmospheric entry. Through the viewport, the blue-green world grew larger. Zaxtel had studied the briefing materials thoroughly. Earth's higher gravity, dense atmosphere, and extreme temperature variations made it a challenging environment by hegemony standards. How humans had evolved to thrive in such conditions remained a subject of scientific debate. The transport touched down on the Academy's landing pad with characteristic hegemony precision. Zaxtel performed one final uniform check, their tendrils rippling with subtle anticipation. Despite their dismissive attitude, they were a scientist at heart, and any new data was worthy of careful observation. As the landing ramp descended, Earth's atmosphere hit them like a physical force. The gravity pulled at their limbs, the air was thick with moisture, and the sunlight felt surprisingly intense. Their environmental suit compensated quickly, but the experience reinforced their preconceptions about human resilience. Any species that evolved in these conditions would naturally be hardy, if unrefined. A small delegation awaited them. 3 humans in crisp uniforms that seemed unnecessarily complex by hegemony standards. The one in front stepped forward, executing what Zaxtel recognized from their briefing as a salute. "Senior Commander Zaxtel, welcome to West Point. I'm Superintendent General Sarah Chen. We're honored to host you this week." Zaxtel returned the greeting with the sweeping tendril gesture of their own military tradition. Their universal translator rendered the humans' words perfectly, though the concept of honor in this context seemed misplaced. What honor could there be in showing a superior civilization such a young institution? "The honor is mine," they responded diplomatically. "I look forward to observing your training methods." General Chen's smile contained something Zaxtel couldn't quite interpret. "We've prepared a comprehensive tour schedule. I think you'll find our methods quite educational." Something in the general's tone triggered a subtle warning in Zaxtel's threat assessment cortex. Before they could analyze it further, the delegation was moving toward the nearest building, and protocol demanded they follow. As they walked, Zaxtel's scientific training took over, cataloging observations. The stone buildings spoke of permanence, not efficiency. The ground showed signs of constant foot traffic, rather than utilizing proper transport technology. And in the distance, they could hear what their translator identified as singing, Dozens of voices raised in rhythmic cadence. How peculiar, they thought. How very peculiar indeed. The first rays of Earth's sun had barely crested the horizon when Commander Zaxtel's peaceful morning meditation was interrupted by a rhythmic sound echoing across the Academy grounds. Their environmental suit's sensors registered the local time as 5:45 hours, far too early for any sensible military training to begin. Curious, they activated their suite's optical enhancement and focused on the source of the disturbance. What they saw made their tendrils curl in disbelief. Hundreds of human cadets were running in formation, their feet striking the ground in perfect synchronization as their voices rose in what the translator identified as a Jodi call. Left, right, left, right, left. Through the jungle, through the night. The translation made little sense to Zaxtel. There was no jungle here, and it was clearly dawn, not night. They made a note to study these apparent cultural contradictions later. Fascinating display, isn't it? General Chen's voice startled them. The human commander had approached silently, something Zaxtel had believed impossible for their species. Morning PT, physical training, is a tradition that dates back centuries. They seem. Zaxtel searched their translator for the appropriate word, enthusiastic, about physical exertion, before their solar cycle has properly begun. Chen's smile widened. Nothing builds unit cohesion quite like shared suffering, Commander. Would you care to observe more closely? Before Zaxtel could formulate a polite decline, they found themselves being led toward the formation. The cadets' running path would bring them directly past the observation point. Their environmental suit's sensors began cataloging biometric data. Elevated heart rates, increased respiration, perspiration coating their skin. By hegemony standards, these were all stress indicators that should trigger immediate medical intervention. Yet the humans were smiling. A new cadence began, the words carrying clearly through the morning air. When my granny was 91, she did PT just for fun. General, Zaxtel's tendrils twitched with confusion. Your translator seems to be malfunctioning. These humans are singing about elderly relatives engaging in voluntary physical stress. The cadences serve multiple purposes, Commander. They maintain pace, build morale, and yes, sometimes they're simply meant to be entertaining. Humor is an important part of military life. Zaxtel's four hearts beat in accelerated rhythm as they processed this information. In hegemony forces, humor was strictly regulated to appropriate recreational periods. The idea of combining it with training was unsettling. The formation drew closer, and Zaxtel's suit sensors detected something else. Pheromones indicating not just physical exertion but genuine pleasure. These humans were actually enjoying their self-imposed suffering. Perhaps, Zaxtel suggested carefully, we could observe your neural training facilities. Surely your advanced cadets utilize proper simulation pods for their combat preparation. General Chen's expression shifted to something the commander's cultural database couldn't quite categorize. Oh, we have simulators, but they're just tools. Nothing replaces ground truth training. Speaking of which, she gestured to a group of cadets setting up what appeared to be an obstacle course. This afternoon's evolution is particularly interesting. The cadets will run the course in full gear, under simulated chemical warfare conditions, while solving complex mathematical equations. All four of Zaxtel's eyes blinked simultaneously. That seems unnecessarily complicated. Exactly, Chen agreed cheerfully. Because combat is unnecessarily complicated, the enemy doesn't wait for ideal conditions, so we don't train in them either. As if to punctuate her point, the running formation reached them, and the ground trembled slightly with the impact of hundreds of booted feet. The cadence had changed again, something about eagles soaring and warriors roaring, delivered with breath that should have been saved for running. Zaxtel made another note in their observation log. Humans appear to derive satisfaction from activities that most species would consider punishment. Further investigation required to determine if this represents a form of collective madness or an undocumented evolutionary advantage. The morning sun climbed higher, and somewhere in the distance, another formation began singing about battling through cosmic storms. Zaxtal's tendrils curled tighter. This was going to be a very long day. The Academy Museum's climate-controlled environment provided welcome relief from the morning's physical observations, but Commander Zaxtal's comfort was short-lived. Their tendrils twitched nervously as they studied the artifacts before them: primitive projectile weapons, torn uniforms, and battered equipment that showed signs of desperate use. "This piece," General Chen said, gesturing to a scared helmet, came from the Battle of Bastogne. The soldier who wore it held his position for 3 days without supplies, in temperatures that would have killed most humans, just to buy time for reinforcements. Zaxtal's environmental suit automatically adjusted its temperature as they processed this information. The soldier survived, of course, once they realized the position was untenable. "He died holding that position," Chen replied quietly. "But because of his sacrifice, hundreds of others lived. We keep his helmet here to remind cadets that sometimes victory requires the ultimate price." The commander's cultural database struggled to categorize this behavior. In hegemony doctrine, sacrificing troops for anything less than absolute strategic necessity was considered wasteful. Yet these humans spoke of such acts with something approaching reverence. They moved deeper into the museum, past displays chronicling centuries of human conflict. Each exhibit told similar stories of humans fighting against impossible odds, adapting to overcome superior forces, refusing to surrender even when logic dictated they should. "This section covers modern warfare," Chen explained, leading them into a room filled with holographic displays. After we achieved spaceflight, many thought traditional military training would become obsolete. The first contact war proved otherwise. Zaxtal's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. They had studied this conflict, humanity's first interstellar war against the now extinct K'Drathi Empire. By all tactical analysis, the humans should have been quickly defeated by the technologically superior force. "Your species was outmatched in every category," they observed carefully. "The K'Drathi had better weapons, stronger shields, faster ships." "True," Chen agreed, activating a hologram that showed a human ship ramming through an enemy vessel's shield barrier. "But they expected us to fight according to their rules of warfare. They never considered that we'd adapt our ancient tactics for space combat." The display shifted to show human soldiers in powered armor using simple metal tools to breach hull plating. The K'Drathi relied entirely on energy weapons. They forgot that sometimes the oldest solutions are still effective. A mechanical crowbar can't be stopped by an electronic warfare suite. Zaxtal made another note in their log. "Humans appear to maintain primitive warfare techniques despite technological advancement. Possible strategic advantage: unpredictability." Their attention was drawn to a small display case containing what appeared to be a simple bound book. "What is this artifact?" "Ah." Chen's expression softened. "That's a personal journal from one of our first space warfare instructors. Would you like to read an excerpt?" Before Zaxtal could respond, Chen activated the display's audio system. A human voice, weathered by age, filled the room. "They think because we're new to the stars, we're new to war. They're wrong. We've been fighting since we could pick up sticks. Every battle we've ever fought. Every war we've survived. Every adaptation we've made. It's all still here, in our tactics, in our training, in our blood. We don't forget our history. We build on it." Zaxtal felt their 4 hearts beat in an uncomfortable rhythm. They had assumed Earth's military academy would be a simple reproduction of more advanced training systems. Instead, they were discovering something far more complex, an institution that somehow merged ancient combat traditions with modern warfare techniques. In the next room, cadets were gathering for a tactical history lesson. Through the doorway, Zaxtal could hear the instructor beginning. "Today, we'll study how ancient Roman legion tactics can be applied to modern orbital drop operations." The commander quickly added another note: "Exercise extreme caution. Humans do not simply remember their military history. They actively seek ways to use it. The combat training facility hummed with activity as Commander Zaxtel followed General Chen through its reinforced doors. Their environmental suits' sensors immediately began cataloging the various training scenarios unfolding across the vast space. In one corner, cadets practiced with what appeared to be archaic projectile weapons. In another, they engaged in close-quarters combat using no weapons at all. "I don't understand." Zaxtel's tendrils twisted in confusion. Why train with obsolete weapons when energy-based systems are clearly superior? Chen gestured toward a group of cadets field-stripping their rifles blindfolded. What happens when your energy weapon runs out of power? When your targeting system fails? When the enemy deploys electromagnetic countermeasures? Before Zaxtel could respond, a loud buzzer sounded. The cadets immediately switched activities with practiced precision. Those at the firing range moved to hand-to-hand combat, while others transitioned to what appeared to be electronic warfare stations. Constant rotation, Chen explained. Every cadet must master multiple disciplines. We call it the Swiss Army knife approach to training. Zaxtel's translator struggled with the idiom, but managed to convey the concept of multifunctional utility. Their attention was drawn to a particularly intense sparring match between two cadets. The movements seemed almost ritualistic, yet carried unmistakable lethal intent. This form of combat, they observed, it appears highly inefficient compared to modern weapons. A new voice joined the conversation. "Permission to demonstrate, General." A tall cadet had approached, her practice armor showing signs of recent combat. Chen's smile carried that same unsettling quality Zaxtel had noticed earlier. "Granted, Cadet Martinez. Commander, would you mind if we arranged a small demonstration?" Before Zaxtel could formulate a diplomatic refusal, Martinez was already explaining. "We've been studying hegemony combat armor specifications. With your permission, I'd like to demonstrate why we still train in hand-to-hand combat." A training drone activated, its protective field generating a perfect replica of standard hegemony battle armor. Zaxtel relaxed slightly. At least this would prove the superiority of their technology. Martinez approached the drone with calculated precision. What followed happened so quickly that Zaxtel's 4 eyes had trouble tracking the movement. The cadet didn't attempt to breach the armor's energy shielding. Instead, she used the drone's own weight and balance points against it, executing a series of strikes that exploited the armor's joint mechanisms. The drone crashed to the ground, its systems registering a critical failure. Hegemony armor is exceptional at deflecting energy weapons, Martinez explained, helping the drone back to its feet. But its joint servos still operate on basic mechanical principles. Impact at the right angle, with the right force. She shrugged. Physics doesn't care how advanced your technology is. Zaxtel made several rapid notes in their log while their hearts attempted to find a stable rhythm. The implications were disturbing. Their species had focused so heavily on technological advancement that they'd abandoned physical combat entirely. How many other vulnerabilities had they overlooked? Of course, Chen added smoothly, this is just basic training. Our advanced hand-to-hand combat courses incorporate techniques from 17 different Earth martial arts, adapted for zero gravity and extreme environmental conditions. The commander watched as Martinez rejoined her squad, immediately engaging in what appeared to be a tactical discussion about improving their technique. These humans weren't just preserving ancient combat methods, they were actively evolving them to meet new challenges. A loud crash drew their attention to another section of the facility. A cadet had just disabled a hovering drone using nothing but a length of cord and impressive acrobatic ability. Ah, Chen nodded approvingly. They're practicing how to take down automated security systems using Bronze Age tools. Quite effective in situations where electronic countermeasures aren't an option. Zaxtel added another note. Humans appear capable of turning any object, regardless of technological sophistication, into a potential weapon. Exercise extreme caution during diplomatic exchanges. Even ceremonial items may serve dual purposes. The Tactical Training Center's holographic display filled the room with a recreation of a space battle. Commander Zach Stahl watched with professional interest as cadet teams faced various combat scenarios. Their initial confidence in hegemony superiority, however, was rapidly eroding. Scenario 7, announced the instructor. Your Corvette patrol encounters a superior enemy force. Communications are jammed. Shields at 20%. Multiple hull breaches. Your objective is to warn the main fleet. Zach Stahl's tendrils rippled with satisfaction. Finally, a proper military exercise with only one logical solution: immediate retreat to preserve vital intelligence. The cadet team had other ideas. Vent atmosphere from decks 3 through 7, the team leader ordered. Redirect power from life support to the engines. Plot a course directly through their formation. The commander's translator must be malfunctioning again. They're deliberately compromising their own life support systems. Watch, Chen suggested quietly. On the tactical display, the human vessel accelerated toward the enemy fleet, trailing clouds of frozen atmosphere. Enemy targeting systems, calibrated for standard ship operations, struggled to get a lock on the partially depressurized vessel. Now, the cadet commander ordered, deploy the mining charges. Zach Stahl's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. Mining charges. In a combat situation. The simulation showed the civilian mining charges, simple devices designed to break up asteroids, detonating in sequence. The electromagnetic pulses played havoc with enemy targeting systems. In the confusion, the human ship slipped through the gap they'd created. Unconventional solutions are often the most effective, Chen noted, especially when the enemy expects you to follow standard tactical doctrine. The next team stepped up. Their scenario involved defending a civilian station against raiders. Instead of positioning their ships in a standard defensive formation, they powered down everything except life support and drifted with the station's garbage disposal units. Humans, Zach Stahl observed with growing unease, seemed to have an unusual relationship with garbage. You'd be surprised how many battles have turned on the clever use of debris, Chen replied. Space combat isn't just about having the best weapons. It's about using everything at your disposal. The training room shifted to a new configuration. This time, the scenario involved planetary combat. Zach Stahl watched in fascination as cadets coordinated complex ground operations while simultaneously managing orbital support. Your training appears to place unusual emphasis on ground combat, they noted. Surely most modern warfare is conducted from orbit. A cadet nearby, Rodriguez, according to their nameplate, spoke up. Permission to explain, General. Chen nodded, and Rodriguez turned to Zach Stahl. Space is just an ocean, Commander, and ships are just vessels. But planets are where people live, where resources exist, where wars are ultimately won or lost. You can't hold territory from orbit. The cadets demonstrated their point in the next simulation. Their forces used the planet's magnetic field to mask their approach, employed the atmosphere to create sensor-confusing plasma effects, and even used the local wildlife as a natural early warning system. Each environment, Rodriguez continued, offers unique tactical advantages if you know how to use them. Standard doctrine says to bombard from orbit. We learn to think differently. Zach Stahl made another note. Human tactical doctrine appears to reject the concept of standardization. Each solution is customized to specific circumstances, making their responses difficult to predict. The final exercise of the session involved a scenario Zach Stahl recognized. It was based on a famous hegemony victory. They watched with growing discomfort as the cadets completely dismantled the classical tactical approach, finding vulnerabilities that centuries of hegemony analysis had missed. Interesting solution, Chen commented as the simulation ended, using the enemy's own communication protocols against them. Very elegant. But Zach Stahl protested. That battle occurred exactly as our historical records show. Of course it did, Chen smiled. Because that's how it was fought then. We train our cadets to think about how it could be fought differently. After all, the next battle is never exactly like the last one. Zaxtal added a final note to their daily observations. Human military education appears designed not just to teach solutions, but to cultivate innovative thinking. Strategic implications. Deeply concerning. The environmental simulation chamber stretched before Commander Zaxtal like a nightmare made real. Their suit sensors struggled to process the rapidly changing conditions as they observed what General Chen casually referred to as survival training. In one section, cadets trudged through deep snow, their breath-forming clouds in the artificial Arctic environment. Nearby, another group crawled through a simulated desert, sand whipping against their protective gear. A third team operated in the crushing pressure of a deep-sea environment. Your species, Zaxtal noted, their tendrils wrapping tightly around themselves for comfort, seems to actively seek out the most hostile conditions possible. Not seek out, Chen corrected, watching as a cadet team successfully constructed a shelter using nothing but local materials in the Arctic zone. Prepare for. The universe is full of environments that don't care about our comfort. We need to be ready for all of them. The chamber cycled through another program. This time, the cadets faced rapidly changing conditions, from freezing cold to intense heat, from standard gravity to zero, from clear visibility to complete darkness. Notice how they adapt, Chen pointed out. No advanced technology, no powered environmental suits, just training, teamwork, and the will to survive. Zaxtal's 4 hearts synchronized in a pattern their medical database identified as stress-related. But surely with modern technology, such primitive survival skills are unnecessary. A new voice joined their conversation. Permission to demonstrate, General. A cadet emerged from the desert simulation, sand still clinging to their uniform. Despite the harsh conditions they just endured, they stood at perfect attention. Granted, Cadet Thompson. Chen nodded. Commander, pay attention to this. It might challenge some of your assumptions. Thompson produced what appeared to be a standard-issue hegemony emergency beacon, the same model Zaxtal carried in their own survival kit. With practiced efficiency, the cadet disassembled it. Standard hegemony survival gear, Thompson explained, laying out the components. Highly advanced, virtually foolproof, and completely useless if you don't understand the basics of survival. The cadet proceeded to repurpose the beacon's components, using its power cell to start a fire, its casing as a water container, its antenna as a fishing tool, and its circuitry housing as a solar still. Technology can fail, Thompson continued, reassembling the beacon. Power cells die. Systems malfunction. But if you understand the fundamental principles of survival, you can adapt anything to meet your basic needs. The simulation chamber shifted again. This time, it replicated the atmosphere of a gas giant's upper layers. Cadets in minimal protective gear maneuvered through the swirling clouds, using the violent storms to their advantage rather than fighting against them. We call it working with the environment, rather than fighting it, Chen explained. Every hostile condition offers some advantage if you know how to use it. Zaxtal watched as the cadets demonstrated this philosophy. In the Arctic zone, they used the snow to build insulated shelters. In the desert, they harvested water from seemingly barren ground. In the ocean depths, they used pressure differentials to power their equipment. But the most important lesson, Chen added, gesturing to where teams were rotating through the different environments, is adaptability. Each cadet must master every environment. Because in real combat, the enemy chooses the battlefield. Zaxtal finished, remembering the phrase from earlier. Their scientific minds suddenly grasped the full implications. The hegemony trained its forces for specific environments, creating specialists. Humans trained to adapt to any environment, creating survivors. A warning klaxon sounded, and the chamber began its most difficult program. The cadets faced rapidly cycling environments, complete communications blackout, and equipment failures. Instead of panicking, they seemed to become more focused, more determined. Zaxtal added to their log with trembling appendages. Human survival training appears designed to create warriors who can operate in any environment with minimal support. Strategic implication: there may be no environment in which they can be reliably neutralized. Commander Zaxtal's final scheduled observation of the day brought them to what the humans called the Crucible, a massive training complex that combined every element they'd witnessed so far. Their environmental suit registered increased stress markers as they watched teams of cadets tackle challenges that seemed deliberately designed to be impossible. "I don't understand the purpose of this exercise," Zaxtal admitted, their tendrils twitching as they watched a team navigate a flooded chamber while solving complex engineering problems. "You're deliberately combining multiple failure scenarios." "Because that's how it happens in reality," General Chen responded, watching as another team adapted their tactics on the fly when their primary and backup plans failed simultaneously. "The enemy won't wait politely for us to deal with one problem at a time." The observation deck provided a panoramic view of the various challenges. In one section, cadets dealt with a simulated reactor breach while defending against cyber attacks. In another, a team performed emergency repairs in zero gravity while maintaining formation against hostile forces. "Notice how they work together," Chen pointed out. "Each cadet brings different skills, different perspectives. Watch that team there." Zaxtal focused their 4 eyes on the indicated group. The cadets came from visibly different backgrounds, their physical characteristics varying widely. In hegemony forces, such variations would be seen as inefficient. Here, something else was happening. "Cadet Lee," Chen narrated, "comes from a family of engineers. Cadet Patel has a background in theoretical physics. Rodriguez there grew up in the Martian colonies, and Williams was a deep-sea welder before joining the academy." The commander watched as this diverse team approached a challenge that had stymied their own military's best units in real combat scenarios. Instead of following standard protocols, each cadet contributed unique insights. They combined their varied experiences to create a solution that would never have occurred to a standardized unit. "Your training actively encourages this diversity." Zaxtal's tendrils coiled in confusion. "We don't just encourage it, we require it," Chen smiled. Mixed background teams consistently outperform homogeneous units. Different perspectives mean different solutions. A sudden explosion rocked one of the training areas. Zaxtal's threat assessment protocols activated automatically, but the cadets didn't even flinch. Instead, they immediately adapted their exercise to account for the new damage, incorporating the debris into their strategy. Most species, Zaxtal observed, would consider this level of training excessive. Most species, Chen countered, train their forces to win battles. We train ours to win wars. There's a difference. The commander was about to inquire about this distinction when their attention was drawn to a particularly innovative solution being attempted below. A team had combined elements from 3 different cultural engineering traditions to solve what should have been an insurmountable problem. "Your cadets," Zaxtal noted, making another entry in their log, "appear to treat established protocols as suggestions rather than rules." "Rules are for peace," a nearby instructor commented. "War demands adaptation." The final phase of the Crucible began. All environmental controls suddenly failed, plunging the facility into chaos. Teams that had been working independently suddenly began coordinating across vast distances, sharing resources and information. What had appeared to be separate challenges revealed themselves as part of a larger scenario. Zaxtal watched in growing concern as the cadets demonstrated their ability to form new organizational structures on the fly, creating command hierarchies based on expertise rather than rank. The entire exercise had been designed to force them to transcend their training and create new solutions. Their log entry trembled as they wrote, "Human military education appears designed to create not just soldiers who can follow orders, but leaders who can operate independently when necessary. Each cadet is trained as if they might need to rebuild their entire civilization from scratch." Strategic implications. Deeply troubling. Traditional containment strategies may be insufficient. Back aboard their transport vessel, Commander Zaxtel's tendrils moved restlessly as they composed their final report to the Hegemony High Command. The ship's artificial intelligence had been recording their verbal notes for hours, but translating their observations into formal recommendations proved challenging. "Computer, begin final report composition," they ordered, all 4 eyes focused on the holographic display. Priority classification. Immediate strategic significance. The familiar soft chime acknowledged the command, but Zaxtel paused, their thoughts returning to the last conversation with General Chen before departure. "I imagine you have some interesting observations to report," Chen had said, that now familiar knowing smile playing at her lips. "Anything that surprised you?" Zaxtel had answered diplomatically, but now, safely aboard their own vessel, they could be more direct. 2. Hegemony High Command Strategic Assessment Division. They began. Subject: Comprehensive Analysis of Human Military Training Methodology. Classification: Critical Intelligence Update. Their tendrils coiled thoughtfully as they organized their findings. Initial assessment parameters have proven dangerously inadequate. Human military training cannot be evaluated by standard hegemony metrics. What appears on surface analysis to be primitive or inefficient instead represents a deeply sophisticated approach to warrior development. The ship's AI dutifully recorded as Zaxtel paced the cabin. Critical finding 1. Humans do not train specialists. Each cadet is prepared to adapt to any combat situation, any environment, any technological level. This creates warriors who cannot be reliably neutralized by eliminating specific capabilities. Through the viewport, Earth's blue-white sphere slowly rotated. From space, it looked deceptively peaceful. Critical finding 2. Human military education actively preserves and incorporates historical combat techniques alongside modern methods. This is not, as previously assumed, mere tradition. They maintain these skills as deliberate tactical alternatives, creating warriors who can operate effectively even when deprived of advanced technology. Zaxtel's environmental suit registered elevated stress markers as they continued. Critical finding 3. Human training emphasizes individual initiative and adaptation over standardized responses. Each warrior is taught to think independently, improvise solutions, and operate effectively even when cut off from command structure. Traditional containment strategies based on disrupting command and control may prove ineffective. The commander's 4 hearts beat in an irregular pattern as they approached their most disturbing conclusion. Critical finding 4. Humans appear to thrive on adversity. Standard hegemony doctrine suggests applying overwhelming force to break enemy morale. Evidence suggests this approach may actually increase human combat effectiveness. They have institutionalized the concept of adaptation under pressure to a degree unprecedented in known military history. Zaxtel moved to the final section of their report. Strategic recommendations. Previous assessments of human military capabilities require immediate revision. Their apparent technological limitations mask a far more dangerous reality. They are preparing for every possible type of warfare simultaneously. Their training methodology suggests a species that refuses to be confined to any single paradigm of combat. The commander paused, considering their next words carefully. Final assessment. The humans' greatest strategic asset is not their technology, their numbers, or their resources. It is their institutionalized adaptability. They are not merely training soldiers. They are creating warriors capable of fighting effectively in any circumstance, at any tech level, in any environment. As Earth receded behind them, Zaxtel added one final note. Personal addendum. I have observed many military training facilities across known space. Most teach their warriors how to fight wars. The humans are teaching theirs how to win them, by any means necessary, under any conditions imaginable. May we never have to test the effectiveness of their methods in actual combat. The commander sealed the report with their highest priority classification. As their ship entered FTL, they found themselves hoping that the Hegemony High Command would take their warnings seriously. Some lessons, they reflected, were better learned through observation than experience.